Hey guys, welcome to another class of contemporary Spanish politics. Today we're going to be talking about the Spanish economy. And well, we're going to start addressing this question, even though there's going to be answer in later classes. Actually, I think I'm going to use two more classes. There's too much material to cover just in one session. So I might actually even split into three sessions. Today, actually, in class, we're going to be addressing the Spanish economic history. We're going to go back in time. And then, we're going to talk about, I didn't really know how to name this, but whether I named it economic structure, how Spanish economy looks like. So we're going to get a snapshot, of what are the main sectors, we're going to talk a little bit about unemployment, where Spain uh, ranks in the world, etc., etc. So we're going to start with the Spanish economic history. We could go back in time. We can even go back to the time of the Isabella and Ferdinand and the Americas and so on. But it's too much to cover. We can talk about the structural problems that the Spanish economy has had over time. But I think the best point to start with the Spanish economic history for this class is post-Francoism. It makes sense with what we've covered in the class. We can also talk about Francoism, but we already mentioned the autarky and how the economy was eventually opening little by little. But we're going to talk about the post-Francoist economy and how in 1977, even before the constitution was voted, what you can see in this picture are what we call the Pactos de la Moncloa. Don't worry about the name Moncloa. It's actually like the White House in Spain, is where the president of the government lives. And that's where Adolfo Suarez called other political parties, trade unions, business organizations, all to meet that it was not only about economy, it was also social pacts and political pacts. But one of the parts of those pacts were related to economy, and particularly a problem that Spain was struggling with at that time. It was inflation. Spain in the late 70s, mid 70s, was had figures of around 20% inflation. 20% inflation is absolutely crazy for any developed economy right now. That will be unsustainable for any developed country. However, Spain was facing that. The solution that they thought of was, obviously, at that time they had monetary power, but there was a Spanish central bank. So what they did was evaluating the peseta to make Spanish products more competitive and to also tackle the problem of prices. Besides that, in the Pactos de la Moncloa, other measures were taken. For example, they introduced the free dismissal, and that allowed companies, businesses to dismiss up to 5% of their of the workers without cause. And actually, there was something very new, and that's something that trade unions agreed to. Also, there were other aspects to these pacts, as for example, in terms of fiscal policy, they introduced some taxes. For example, the not the income tax, obviously that one already existed, but the patrimonio, so the wealth tax. So and they also improved the taxing system. They also allowed for those who had money in tax haven or money that they had paid their taxes, they could regularize their situation without having a fine, etc., etc. And also, tax evasion became a crime in 1977. So the Spanish economy was kind of developing. There were a lot of changes trying to adapt the economy to a modern world where Spain was not part of, because of what we know with Francoism. In 1977, Pactos de la Moncloa were a big part to that. 1982, the socialist took government, and in 1986, Spain joined the European Union. And the entrance to the European Union, obviously, it's a very important moment for the Spanish economy. It was an important moment with two sides to that question, so to say. There were positive, mostly positive aspects. There were also negative aspects. In terms of negative aspects, Spain had to, first regularize its economy, not regularize it, but pretty much keep it, make it competitive to the European Union, and that's good because all these figures, for example, the inflation figure we were talking about, we were required to correct that situation. Also had to do with public debt. We'll see that was even more stricter later with the euro, with public debt, public deficit, also inflation. But another issue that was necessary to tackle was those industries that were not competitive. By the end of the day, by joining the European Union, we were joining a common market at that time of 12 countries, where companies could compete with each other without the protection of barriers, of trade barriers. So that will mean that actually many Spanish companies will not be competitive anymore, and and that will result obviously in people being laid off. But at the end of the day, if a company was not competitive anymore, they will have to close. And this particularly happened with heavy industries. We were talking about coal mining. We were talking about steel companies. We were talking about shipyards. So there was actually it was a we call it a reconversión industrial. We have to rethink, so to say, our industry, and this is something that every country has gone through in the world. Kind of, I mean, in some places we're still going through. I mean, this is absolutely a very current topic in the U.S. with some parts of the country. And I mean, if we talk, I think Pennsylvania, or we talk Detroit with automobile industry. But by the end of the day, this happened in Spain, and it was very dramatic in the 80s, starting in 1982, and this went all through the decade. However, from 1986, we started getting the positives of joining the European Union. And obviously, that was participating of the market, and that obviously increased the ability to export. I mean, later we're going to talk about trade in Spain. We're very briefly, I'm going to refer to that later on. But by the end of the day, we just got access to a massive market that we didn't have before. And actually, in the last few years of the decade, in 87, 88, and 89, the Spanish economy grew steadily. Unemployment was dropping at that time. So actually, it was very beneficial. On the other hand, also, the European Union has structural funds, and that's funding to for those countries within the union that are less developed, and to try to balance the economies and make them all as competitive, because overall that will benefit the whole union and trade on the whole union. If we continue, we can go up to 1993, and actually Spain here faced a big crisis. I mean, not as big as the one in 2008. Actually, we're going to talk about the financial crisis in the next class. But in 1993, we did have a crisis, not as deep. It only really lasted for a year, but even though the economy was decelerating since the 1990 up until 1993 when the crisis took place. But the main problem of that crisis was not that big with GDP. Actually, the GDP figures only dropped 1% that year, but we were talking about almost 23% unemployment that year, and that obviously was a big a big problem, even for a country that, as we're going to see later, we are used to high figures of unemployment. It was very high, and actually needed correction. Why? Because actually we were in the process of, after Maastricht in 1992, we were in the path to joining the single currency in Europe, the euro, that we will have from 2002. And to join the euro, there were some convergence criteria. We needed to fulfill those criteria that referred to, once again, to public debt, to public deficit, to inflation, and also, oh my God, I cannot find the word when you, the exchange rate of the currency at that time, peseta, had to be also controlled. Spain managed to do so. Actually, by 1997, that was a year that was targeted. 1997 and 1998, Spain fulfilled the requirements. So actually, we were able to join euro in 2002. And from that moment, we do not control our monetary policy anymore. It's controlled from Frankfurt. So actually, and that's a big economic tool that we gave up there. Obviously, there are positives there. By having a single market, sharing a single currency, you make that market much more efficient. You get rid of transaction costs of exchanging currency. So that obviously was very positive for the Spanish economy overall. And from 1997 to 2007, we can talk about the glory days for the Spanish economy. We were growing steadily at an average 3% rate, and that's very strong for a decade. And an unemployment, we'll see later, but drop all to historical minimums in Spain. And what José María Aznar, president of the government between 1996 and 2004, used to say quite often, España va bien. Spain is doing well. And it was absolutely true. Our economy was doing well. Also, at that time, we privatized quite a few public companies, and obviously the state got quite some money there. The public deficit was dropping. I mean, it was a fantastic time for Spanish economy. However, 2008, we'll talk about this in the next class, but the global financial crisis hit Spain more than many other economies, and we struggled. And it was only in 2015 when we started really recovering from the financial crisis. I mean, this was a little bit. I mean putting in 10 minutes the Spanish economy history is a bit of a challenge. I mean, this was a very small snapshot. I hope you got a little bit of what happened in the last few decades. But yeah, but we're gonna have a break now. We're gonna keep talking about the Spanish economy after it. So see you in a minute.